Hello, lovelies. Lena here. Some women have a way of making one sentence feel like a whole conversation. This is the story of a guest who said the wrong thing at a hotel front desk, a bro, and a manager who heard every word. 3 days, one hotel, and something neither of them saw coming. Let's begin.
The lobby of the Fern and Stone Hotel smelled like cedar and something faintly floral, the kind of smell that costs money without announcing it. Zoe noticed that before she noticed anything else, which said something about the state she was in. 2 delayed flights, a connecting gate that had changed 3 times, and a presentation that existed at that moment as 40% of a slide deck and a great deal of optimism. She was dragging her carry-on across marble floors at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and she had exactly the amount of patience that suggested. "You're going to love this place," Bex said, walking beside her with the effortless energy of someone who had slept on both flights and eaten a full sandwich while doing it. "The reviews said the beds are, if you say the word clouds, I will leave you here." "I was going to say firm," Bex said, "but also a little bit clouds." The check-in line had 2 people ahead of them. Zoe used the time to pull out her phone and open the slide deck, which greeted her with the same unfinished 3rd section it had been greeting her with since Sunday. She closed it. She opened it again. She closed it again. When they reached the desk, the woman behind it looked up from her screen, and Zoe's brain did something involuntary and inconvenient. The kind of thing that happens before you give it permission. The woman, her name tag read Camille, general manager, had dark hair pulled back with the kind of careless precision that takes genuine effort, and she looked at Zoe the way people rarely do in hotels, like she was actually seeing her, not processing her. "Welcome to Fern and Stone," Camille said. "Do you have a reservation?" "Zoe Callahan, and..." She gestured to Bex. "Bex Navarro," Camille typed. Frowned, just barely. The kind of frown that lives only at the corners of the eyes. "I'm seeing your reservation, Ms. Callahan, but it looks like there was a system error on your room assignment. You were booked for a standard queen, but that room is currently unavailable." A pause. "I'm going to move you to one of our corner rooms on the 8th floor at the same rate. It's a significant upgrade. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." She said it like she meant the upgrade and the apology equally. Zoe blinked. No, that's completely fine. Thank you." Camille nodded and returned to her screen. There was something in the way she moved through the problem. No performance of concern, no over-explanation, that was quietly, specifically impressive. She handled it the way people handle things when competence is just their default setting, not something they're demonstrating. Zoe turned to Bex and said, low enough that it shouldn't carry, "She's dangerously beautiful." The words left her mouth with 0 editorial oversight. She would think about this later, about the specific cocktail of exhaustion and delayed flight derangement that bypasses the part of the brain responsible for not saying things out loud. Camille looked up, not sharply, not with the expression of someone who had been startled or offended. She looked up the way a person looks up when they've heard their name in a crowd. A small, calm orientation toward the source of the sound. Her eyes met Zoe's for exactly long enough to confirm that yes, she had heard, and yes, she was choosing her next move deliberately. Then she slid 2 key cards across the desk. "8th floor, to your left out of the elevator," she said. Her voice was exactly the same as before. "The corner rooms have a view of the Cumberland. I think you'll like it." The smile that followed wasn't professional. It was something quieter and more specific than that. The kind of smile that acknowledges a shared moment without making it a thing. And somehow that was worse. Or better. Zoe wasn't sure which yet. She took the key cards. Bex took hers. They walked to the elevator in silence. "So," Bex said, as the doors closed. "Don't." "I wasn't going to say anything." "You were absolutely going to say something." Bex pressed 8. "I was just going to say the reviews were right about the upgrade policy." Zoe stared at the elevator doors and said nothing, which Bex correctly interpreted as all the confirmation she needed. The corner room on the 8th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Cumberland River catching the last light of the evening. Zoe stood in front of the glass for approximately 4 seconds before opening her laptop and pretending the view wasn't there. If this is your first time here, welcome. Subscribe and drop a comment below. First visit? Or have you been here a while? We read every single one. Bex threw herself onto the second bed with the full commitment of someone who had been waiting to do exactly that for 6 hours. Okay, she said to the ceiling. Walk me through it. There's nothing to walk through. You told a stranger she was dangerously beautiful within 40 seconds of meeting her. I told you she was dangerously beautiful. She just happened to be in the general acoustic vicinity. The general acoustic vicinity, Bex repeated. That's what we're calling 3 feet away. Zoe sat on the edge of her bed and opened the slide deck again. The third section was still unfinished. The Cumberland was still catching the light outside. Camille's expression when she looked up, that specific, unhurried orientation, was still doing something in the back of her mind that she didn't have the bandwidth to examine. It was a comment. People make comments. People make comments to themselves in their heads, Beck said. You made yours at full volume to another human being, who then handed you a room key like nothing happened. She was professional about it. She was something about it. Bex rolled onto her side. That smile, Zoe. Zoe knew exactly which smile Bex meant. That was the problem. It hadn't been the kind of smile you forget by the time the elevator reaches the 8th floor. It had been the kind that installs itself somewhere specific and stays there. And now she was sitting on a very nice bed, in a very nice upgraded room, staring at an incomplete presentation. And the smile was still running in the background like an open tab she couldn't close. I have 40 slides to finish by Thursday morning, she said. Okay. And a dinner with the regional team tomorrow night that I am dreading. Also okay. And I cannot spend this trip, she gestured at nothing in particular, at the whole situation. Doing this. Bex sat up. She had the expression she got when she was about to say something that was going to be correct and irritating in equal measure. Doing what? Exactly. Noticing that a woman is beautiful? That's not a plan, Zoe. That's just your eyes working. It's not just... Zoe stopped. She closed the laptop. It was the way she handled it. The reservation thing. She didn't make a production of it. She just fixed it. That's all I'm saying. Sure. I'm not saying anything else. You don't have to, Bex said pleasantly, and picked up the room service menu like the conversation was finished, which it was because she had already won it. Zoe lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling. The room was quiet in the way expensive rooms are quiet, thoroughly, on purpose. Outside, Nashville was doing whatever Nashville does on a Tuesday evening, and somewhere 8 floors below, Camille was probably handling 3 other things with the same unhurried competence, not thinking about this at all. That was the rational version. Zoe held onto it for a while. Then she thought about the smile again, and the rational version became significantly harder to maintain. Zoe had a theory about hotels at 7 a.m. They existed in a parallel version of themselves. The lobby that had felt curated and intentional the night before now had a quieter, more honest quality. Staff moving with purpose. The breakfast area filling slowly. The marble floors catching early light from windows that faced east. It was the version of a place that hadn't put its face on yet, and Zoe had always preferred it. She had been up since 5. The third section of the presentation was finished, which she felt good about, and she had eaten half a granola bar and called it breakfast, which she felt less good about. Bex was still asleep in the position of someone who had negotiated a peace treaty with her mattress and intended to honor it until at least 9. The breakfast area was a long room off the main lobby, with good light and small tables, and a coffee station that Zoe located with the instinct of someone for whom coffee was less a preference than a structural requirement. She filled a cup, found a table near the window, opened her laptop, and had approximately 4 minutes of productive silence before she became aware that someone was standing at the edge of the room. Camille. Not behind a desk this time. Moving through the breakfast area the way she had moved through the reservation problem the night before. With the same unhurried attention, checking something on a tablet, exchanging a few words with a staff member near the service station. She was dressed differently from the night before, but with the same quality of looking exactly right for the context, which Zoe noticed and immediately told herself was not a thing she was going to keep noticing. She looked back at her laptop. She looked back at Camille. Laptop. Camille. Laptop. Camille crossed the room and stopped at the coffee station. She poured a cup without looking up from her tablet. Then she did look up, and directly at Zoe, with no particular surprise, as though she had registered her presence already and was simply acknowledging it now. "Good morning," she said. The same voice as the night before, even and warm in a way that didn't perform warmth. "Morning," Zoe said. "Early start." "Always." Camille glanced at the laptop. "Presentation?" "How did you—" "You have the look," Camille said, and something at the edge of her mouth moved. "People finishing work they should have finished before they got here. There's a specific energy." Zoe laughed before she could decide not to. "That's accurate and a little unflattering." "It's a compliment," Camille said. "It means you care about it." She said it simply, without decoration, and moved to refill something at the service station. No lingering, no performance of the moment. She treated it the way she seemed to treat most things. As a thing that happened. Noted. Complete. Zoe watched her cross back toward the lobby entrance and told herself that was the end of it. A brief exchange. Hotel small talk. The kind of thing that happens between guests and staff in the early morning when everyone is slightly more human than they intend to be. Then Camille paused at the threshold of the breakfast room. Not to look back. She didn't look back. But to say something to the staff member near the door, and in the saying of it she tilted her head slightly, and the early light from the east-facing windows caught the angle of her face in a way that made Zoe's hand stop moving over the keyboard for a full 3 seconds. She looked back at the screen. The 3rd section was finished. The 4th was still blank. She started typing and did not think about the way the light had hit, or the specific temperature of the phrase "it means you care about it," or the fact that Camille had clocked her laptop from across the room before she had said a single word. She did not think about any of that. She thought about it constantly. Before we continue, if this story is pulling you in, my Patreon is where you'll find more of it. Different women, deeper stories, longer chapters with the kind of detail that doesn't fit in a YouTube video. If you want more of this world, the link is right below. Zoe heard the man before she saw him. She was crossing the lobby at 11:30, laptop bag over one shoulder, conference badge swinging from the lanyard she had forgotten to take off, when a voice cut through the ambient hum of the hotel with the specific frequency of someone who had decided that volume was a substitute for reason. He was standing at the front desk, mid-50s, suit that cost more than it deserved to, the expression of a man who had confused being a paying guest with being owed something by the universe. "I've been a member of this program for 11 years, he was saying, to whoever was unfortunate enough to be behind the desk. 11 years, and this is the room you're giving me." Zoe slowed without meaning to. The staff member at the desk, young, composed, doing an admirable job of holding her expression neutral, was midway through a response when Camille appeared from the corridor behind the desk with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been summoned by instinct rather than alarm. She didn't rush. She didn't adopt the posture of someone walking into a conflict. She simply arrived, touched the staff member lightly on the arm in a way that said, "I have this," and turned her attention to the man with the full, unhurried weight of it. "Mr. Hargrove," she said. "I'm Camille Arquette, the general manager. Can you tell me what's happened?" He told her, at length. The room faced the wrong direction. The floor was too low. The bathroom had the wrong kind of fixtures. He had requested a king bed and received what he described with genuine feeling as something approaching a queen. Zoe stood near the concierge desk, pretending to check her phone and not pretending very hard. Camille listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't nod excessively, didn't perform concern. She just listened with the kind of attention that made the listening itself feel like a response. When he finished, she said, "I understand. Let me see what we have available." She typed. She looked at the screen. She looked back at him. "I have a suite on the 12th floor that faces the river. It has a king bed and the bathroom you're describing. I'll have your things moved within the hour at no charge. And I'd like to offer you breakfast, tomorrow morning compliments of the hotel." He considered this. The bluster had no clean place to land anymore. "Fine," he said finally, with the tone of a man who had wanted a fight and been offered a solution instead, which was somehow harder to deal with. "Fine. That's acceptable." "Thank you for your patience," Camille said, which was generous given that he had demonstrated none. She handed him a new key card, said something brief to the staff member, and turned to go. She caught Zoe's eye on the way. Not for long. A second, maybe less. But there was something in it. Not amusement exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that acknowledged that Zoe had witnessed the whole thing and that Camille knew it. A private frequency between two people in the same room, who had both just watched the same small theater play out. Zoe felt it somewhere behind her sternum. She looked down at her phone. Bex had texted, "Lunch. There's a place 2 blocks over that has hot chicken and I have feelings about it." She typed back, "Give me 10 minutes." She did not move for 10 minutes. She stood near the concierge desk and thought about the way Camille had touched the staff member's arm. The economy of it. The care packed into something that small. The way she had listened to a man being unreasonable without letting his unreasonableness set the temperature of the room. The way she had looked at Zoe for 1 second on her way out and communicated something that didn't have an easy name. Her phone buzzed. Bex again. 9 minutes. Zoe put her phone in her pocket and walked toward the exit and told herself she was thinking about the presentation, which had 3 slides left and a conclusion that still needed work. And not about a woman who handled difficult things, like they were simply things to be handled, and who had a way of making 1 second of eye contact feel like a full sentence. She was mostly unsuccessful. The conference ran until 6. Zoe sat through 4 panels, 2 networking lunches she hadn't wanted to attend, and 1 keynote that used the phrase disruptive synergy without irony, and by the time she walked back into the Fern and Stone at 6:23 p.m. She had the specific exhaustion of someone who had been performing attentiveness for 8 hours straight. Bex had texted at 4 to say she was going to a rooftop bar with someone she'd met at the hotel gym and would be back by 9, which Zoe had read as "You have the room to yourself and no obligations until dinner tomorrow," and which she intended to use to finish the conclusion slide and sleep for 11 hours, in that order. She crossed the lobby without looking at the front desk. She was proud of this. The elevator arrived immediately, which felt like a reward. She stepped in, pressed 8, and was approximately 3 seconds from having the whole ride to herself when a hand caught the door. Camille stepped in. She was still in her work clothes, but with the slight loosening of someone at the end of a long day. Jacket still on, but something in her posture that was half a degree less formal than the morning. She pressed the button for the 10th floor without looking at the panel, and then looked at Zoe, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The doors closed. "Long day?" Camille asked. 8 hours of people explaining things I already knew, Zoe said. "You?" One guest who needed his suite re-explained to him 4 separate times. A pause. "Same suite," Zoe laughed. "Mr. Hargrove?" I couldn't possibly say, but the corner of her mouth moved. "How's the presentation?" 3 slides and a conclusion. From 40% to 3 slides in one day. That's not nothing. Zoe looked at her. You remember that? Camille met her eyes briefly. You mentioned 40 slides at check-in. You're down to 3. I pay attention. The elevator was slow in the way old elevators in nice hotels are slow, deliberate, unhurried, as though it understood that the architecture around it deserved to be taken at a certain pace. 4 minutes, Zoe would think later. They had 4 minutes, which is nothing, and also, depending on what fills it, not nothing at all. Can I ask you something? Zoe said. You can ask. Last night, at the desk. She didn't look away. You heard what I said. I did, Camille said. Simply. No performance of not having heard, no pretending. And you just handed me the key cards. What would you have preferred I do? Zoe considered this genuinely. I don't know. Something. Made it awkward. Pretended you hadn't heard. Made a face. Would any of those have been better? No, Zoe admitted. Then why do them? Camille said. She wasn't looking at the doors. She was looking at Zoe with the same quality of attention she gave everything. Full, direct, unhurried. You said something honest. I heard it. I didn't think it required a production. The elevator stopped at 8. The doors opened. Zoe should have moved and didn't, immediately, because the sentence was still settling. That's a very calm way to handle something like that, she said. I'm generally a calm person, Camille said. And then, quieter. The way people say things they've decided to say, rather than things that slip out. It wasn't a hardship to hear. The doors began to close. Zoe put her hand out and stopped them. Good night, Camille, she said. Good night, Zoe. The first time she had used her name, not Ms. Callahan, Zoe, like a door opening 1 inch and staying there. She stepped out. The elevator continued to 10. She stood in the hallway for a moment longer than necessary, her hand still holding the ghost of the door she had stopped, and thought about 4 minutes and what a person can fit inside them when they're paying attention. She went to her room. She opened the laptop. She wrote the conclusion in 20 minutes, which was the fastest she had written anything in months, and she did not examine why. Bex noticed at breakfast. She didn't say anything immediately, which was its own kind of warning. Bex's silences were not passive. They were load-bearing, structural, the kind that meant she was collecting information before deploying it with precision. She ate her eggs. She drank her coffee. She looked at Zoe across the small table with the expression of a scientist observing a particularly interesting variable. What? Zoe said. Nothing. You have a face. I have my normal face. You have your other face, Zoe said. The one you get when you know something and you're waiting for me to catch up. Bex refilled her coffee. How'd the conclusion turn out? Fine. Good, actually. I finished it by 8. A pause. And what time did you get back to the room? Around 6:30. And you finished by 8. Bex set down her cup. So something happened between 6:30 and 8 that unblocked you. Zoe opened her mouth. Closed it. I was just tired enough that my brain stopped overthinking it. Sure, Bex said, in the tone she used when she was filing something away for later. They ate in silence for a moment. The breakfast room had filled up since yesterday morning. The conference crowd arriving in waves, badge lanyards everywhere. The ambient noise of people performing networking before 9 a.m. Zoe watched the room and thought about the presentation, which she was delivering at 2, and the regional dinner tonight, which she was dreading, and the fact that checkout was tomorrow morning, which she was not thinking about. She was definitely not thinking about that. At 10:30, she was in the business center off the main lobby, a small room with decent printers and aggressively neutral decor, running her slides through the projector to check formatting, when the door opened and a staff member leaned in. Ms. Callahan? Ms. Arquette asked me to check if you needed anything for your presentation this afternoon. She mentioned you were using the Magnolia Room. Zoe looked up. Yes. I was actually going to ask about the clicker for the projector. The one in there yesterday kept skipping slides. She already flagged that. There's a replacement at the front desk whenever you're ready, and she's asked tech to do a full check of the room before your session. Zoe sat with that for a moment. She flagged it. Yes, ma'am. This morning. She hadn't mentioned the clicker to Camille. She hadn't mentioned the Magnolia Room. She had said 40 slides at check-in, and apparently that had been enough. Thank you, Zoe said. Tell her. She stopped. Just thank you. The staff member nodded and left. Zoe turned back to her slides and stared at the title slide for a long moment, not reading it. There was a version of this she could explain simply. A good hotel manager anticipating a guest's needs, doing her job thoroughly, nothing more. Zoe had stayed in enough hotels to know that this level of attention was not standard. It was chosen. It was specific. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Bex. She had the projector fixed before I asked. Bex's response came in 4 seconds. Marry her. Zoe put her phone face down on the desk. The presentation went well. Better than well. The third section landed exactly as she'd intended. The conclusion got the response she'd hoped for. And the regional director shook her hand afterward, with the particular enthusiasm of someone revising their opinion upward in real time. Zoe stood in the Magnolia Room afterward, while people filed out, and felt the specific quiet satisfaction of having done a hard thing well. The clicker had worked perfectly. Every slide, clean. She was gathering her things when she looked up and found Camille standing in the doorway of the Magnolia Room. Not all the way in, just at the threshold, the way she'd been at the breakfast room that morning. Like she existed slightly outside the frame of every room she entered by choice. How did it go? Camille asked. Well, Zoe said. Really well, actually. She paused. You fixed the clicker. The tech team fixed the clicker. You told the tech team. Camille's expression was mild. It's my job to notice things. You're very good at it, Zoe said, and she meant it as a simple statement of fact, and it landed as something warmer than that, and neither of them moved to correct it. Good luck with the dinner tonight, Camille said. I haven't mentioned a dinner. Conference schedule, she said. It's on the board in the lobby. A beat. Regional team dinners are usually either very good or completely insufferable. I hope it's the former. Statistically, Zoe said, it'll be the latter. Camille smiled. Not the professional one, not the quiet private one from check-in. Something more open than both. It lasted only a moment before she pulled it back, the way you pull a door almost shut without latching it. Good night, Zoe. In advance. She left. Zoe stood in the empty Magnolia Room, with her laptop bag and her successful presentation, and the persistent, inconvenient warmth of being known, even partially, even briefly, by someone who paid attention like it was a form of care. The regional dinner was, as predicted, completely insufferable. Not in any dramatic way. No scenes, no disasters, no one saying anything genuinely objectionable. It was insufferable in the specific way of dinners where everyone is performing a version of themselves calibrated for professional consumption, where the conversation moves in careful orbits around anything real, and where the wine is good enough to make you wish you were somewhere else drinking it. Zoe sat between the regional director and a colleague from the Denver office who wanted to talk about quarterly projections for 2 hours, and she did, because that was the job. And she was good at the job. And being good at the job sometimes meant having the quarterly projections conversation with genuine attention, even when every part of you wanted to be somewhere quieter. She was back at the hotel by 9:15. The lobby was different. She registered this immediately. Something had shifted in the light and the sound, the way hotels shift in the evening when an event takes over. There was music coming from somewhere above, and the elevator buttons told her the rooftop was active, and a woman near the concierge desk was holding a glass of champagne and laughing at something with the full-body commitment of a person having an excellent time. Bex was already up there. She had texted at 7. Hotel rooftop event tonight, open to guests. There are small things on bread, and I've had 4, come when you're done. Zoe changed out of her conference clothes, put on something that wasn't a blazer, and went up. The rooftop had been transformed. String lights along the perimeter, small tables with candles, the Nashville skyline doing its best work in the background. It was the kind of setting that made people feel like their lives were more cinematic than usual. And Zoe had to admit, standing at the threshold with the warm evening air hitting her face after 2 hours of climate-controlled professional dinner, that it was working on her. Bex found her in 45 seconds. You came. You mentioned bread. There's also wine. Bex handed her a glass that had materialized from somewhere. And before you ask, yes, she's here. Zoe did not ask who. Where? Bex tilted her head toward the far end of the rooftop, near the railing that faced the river. Camille was standing with 2 staff members, not in her usual manager posture, not checking a tablet, not moving through a problem. Just standing, glass in hand, looking at the skyline with the ease of someone who had earned the right to stop for a moment. She was wearing something different. Still dark, still precise, but without the structure of the workday. She looked like herself in a different key. Zoe drank some wine and looked at the skyline, and did not walk over immediately, because she was a grown adult with professional restraint, and also because her heart was doing something mildly unreasonable, and she wanted to give it a moment to settle. It didn't settle. She walked over anyway. Camille saw her coming, and the staff members took their leave with the natural timing of people who understood when a conversation was about to become a different kind of conversation. You survived, Camille said. Barely. 2 hours of quarterly projections. I've heard worse. She handed Zoe a spot at the railing beside her, which wasn't a physical thing anyone can do, but which she managed anyway. A slight shift in her own position that made space without making a production of it. Nashville at night is the consolation prize. Zoe looked out at the river, the bridges, the lights scattered across the far bank. It's a good one. They stood for a moment in the particular silence of 2 people who have moved past the need to fill space. Below them, the city moved, unhurried. Above them, the string lights made everything amber and soft. Can I ask you something? Camille said. You can ask, Zoe said, returning the words from the elevator. And Camille caught it, and something in her expression shifted. The recognition of a shared reference, the small pleasure of a callback landing. What do you do, Camille said, when the thing you're good at is the thing that keeps you from doing other things? Zoe turned to look at her. It was not a hotel manager question. It was a person question, the kind that surfaces after a certain hour and a certain amount of evening air. What are you good at? Anticipating what people need, Camille said. Solving things before they become problems, making everything around me run smoothly. A pause. It's very useful professionally. And personally? Camille looked at the river. Personally, it means I'm very good at making sure everyone else is comfortable, and considerably less practiced at asking for anything myself. Zoe was quiet for a moment. That's honest. It's late, Camille said simply. I'm tired of being strategic. Something shifted between them. Not dramatically, not with any of the theater that Zoe had always associated with moments that matter. It was quiet. The string lights held. The river kept moving below. Camille turned from the skyline and looked at her, and Zoe looked back, and the distance between them on that rooftop railing was small enough that she was aware of it as a specific measurement. I'm the opposite, Zoe said. I ask for things constantly. I just never ask for the ones that count. Camille's eyes stayed on hers. What would you ask for, she said, if you were asking for the ones that count? The question sat between them, open and unhurried, the way Camille did everything. Zoe opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the river, then back. "More time," she said finally. "I'd ask for more time." Camille held her gaze for a long, steady moment. Then she looked back at the skyline, and her shoulder was close enough to Zoe's that the warmth between them was a real and specific thing. And she said, "Checkout's at 11. It was not a solution. It was not a declaration. It was the door again, open 1 inch, held there. An invitation to notice that it was open. Nothing more." Zoe noticed. She woke up thinking about the rooftop. Not in a hazy, half-asleep way. In the fully conscious, eyes open at 6 a.m. way of someone whose brain had been quietly processing something all night and had reached a conclusion it was ready to present. The conclusion was simple and inconvenient. She liked Camille. Not in the ambient, generalized way she had tried to frame it since check-in. In the specific, directional way that had a weight to it. The kind that doesn't ask permission and doesn't particularly care about checkout times. Bex was still asleep. Zoe lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about more time and checkouts at 11 and the inch of open door, and by the time the room was light enough to see clearly, she had made a decision that was not quite a decision, but was adjacent to one. She was going to stop managing this and see what it was. She went down to the lobby at 8, with that quiet resolution sitting in her chest like something warm and anchored. She saw Camille at 8:14. She was at the far end of the lobby near the entrance to the conference corridor, and she was not alone. The man beside her was tall, well-dressed, the kind of easy confidence that suggested he belonged wherever he was standing. He said something, and Camille laughed, fully, genuinely, with her head tilting back slightly the way it did when something actually reached her. And then he touched her arm, and she didn't move away from it, and his hand stayed there a beat longer than professional contact usually does. Zoe stopped walking. The warm, anchored thing in her chest did something complicated. She watched for 3 seconds, which was long enough to construct an entire architecture of meaning around what she was seeing, and not long enough to verify any of it. The man leaned in to say something close to Camille's ear. Camille nodded, still smiling. He touched her arm again, briefly, on his way past, and disappeared into the conference corridor. Zoe went to the breakfast room. She got coffee. She sat at the window table, her table, the one from yesterday morning, and looked at the Cumberland, and told herself several reasonable things in succession. She told herself she had been here 2 days. She told herself she knew almost nothing about Camille's life outside of this building. She told herself that a laugh and a hand on an arm were not a story, that she had just spent 48 hours building something in her head, out of key cards and elevator rides and rooftop conversations, that had meant what they meant to her, and might have meant something entirely different to someone who talked to guests every day of the week. She told herself all of this, and it was all correct, and none of it particularly helped. Bex arrived at 8:40 with the expression of someone who had slept well, and was prepared to be cheerful about it, took one look at Zoe's face, and sat down without saying anything immediately, which was the most useful thing she could have done. "Tell me," she said finally. Zoe told her, briefly. The man, the laugh, the arm. Bex listened. She refilled her coffee. She said, "And you're sure it was—" "I don't know what it was," Zoe said. "That's the point. I don't know anything about her. I know she's good at her job, and she's thoughtful, and she says things on rooftops at night that make me want to stay in Nashville indefinitely, and I know absolutely nothing else." "Okay," Bex said, "and checkout is tomorrow." "Also okay. So." Zoe wrapped both hands around her cup. "It doesn't matter." Bex looked at her with the specific patience she reserved for moments when Zoe was being demonstrably wrong and needed to arrive at that conclusion herself. She didn't push. She just waited, the way good friends do, in the knowledge that the wrong conclusion usually collapses under its own weight. Eventually, Zoe spent the rest of the morning in the conference sessions. She sat through 2 panels and took notes she wouldn't need, and answered emails on her phone, and did not go through the lobby if she could use the side entrance, and told herself this was practical rather than avoidant, which was not entirely convincing, but was functional enough to get her through until noon. At lunch, she sat with colleagues from the morning session and talked about things that didn't matter, and smiled at the right moments, and was, by any external measure, completely fine. She was not completely fine. She was a woman who had decided to stop managing something and then immediately found a reason to manage it harder than before, which was such a recognizable pattern that she almost laughed at herself in the middle of a conversation about market segmentation. Almost. By mid-afternoon, she had made a new decision, which was the opposite of the morning's decision. She would finish the conference, pack her things, check out tomorrow at 11, go back to her real life and her real apartment and the version of herself that didn't spend 4 minutes in hotel elevators memorizing the way someone said her name. This was sensible. This was proportionate. She went back to the room at 5. She opened her suitcase. She started folding things into it with the deliberate energy of someone making a point to themselves. Bex watched from her bed. "You're packing a day early." Being organized. You've never been organized a day in your life. Zoe folded a shirt that did not need folding. There's a first time for everything. Bex was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're allowed to ask, you know. You're allowed to just ask." "Ask what?" "Whatever the question is," Bex said simply. "You keep trying to answer it without asking it. That's not how it works." Zoe set the shirt down. She looked at it. She thought about a rooftop and a river and a door held open 1 inch and a laugh she had watched from across a lobby and assigned a meaning to without any real evidence. She thought about 48 hours and check out at 11 and more time, and how she had answered that question with something true, and then spent the entire next day running from it. She left the shirt in the suitcase, unfolded. She didn't say anything else, but she stopped packing. She didn't sleep well. Not badly enough to be dramatic about it. She slept, in the fragmented way of someone whose mind had decided that full unconsciousness was a luxury it wasn't prepared to authorize. She woke at 2, at 4, at 6:12, and each time the room was the same. Dark, quiet, the Cumberland doing whatever rivers do at that hour, Bex a peaceful shape in the other bed, the half-packed suitcase on the luggage rack with the unfolded shirt still in it, like a small flag of unresolved intent. By 7, she gave up and showered and made coffee from the in-room machine, which was not as good as the lobby coffee, but which required no decisions beyond pressing a button, and that felt appropriate for the morning. Bex woke at 8 and did not ask how she had slept, which meant she already knew. They packed in companionable quiet. Zoe finished the suitcase, folding the shirt this time, properly, with the resignation of someone closing a door from the outside. She checked the bathroom twice for things she hadn't forgotten. She looked at the view from the corner windows one last time. The river catching the morning light, the bridges, the far bank. Nashville going about its business with total indifference to the minor interior weather of one guest on the 8th floor. "Ready?" Bex asked. "Yeah," Zoe said. "Let's go." The lobby at 10:50 had the particular energy of a checkout rush, rolling suitcases, conference badges going into pockets for the last time, the front desk busy with the organized chaos of a hotel turning over its rooms. Zoe joined the shorter of the 2 lines and looked at her phone, and did not look at the desk, and then looked at the desk. Camille wasn't there. 2 staff members were handling the checkout queue efficiently and pleasantly, and the lobby was full of the normal sounds of departure, and Zoe stood in line with her suitcase and felt something settle in her chest that was not quite relief and not quite disappointment, but lived in the neighborhood of both. She reached the desk. The staff member, young, efficient, the same one from the Mr. Hargrove incident, smiled and pulled up her reservation. "Checking out, Ms. Callahan?" "Yes." "How was your stay?" "Really good," Zoe said, and meant it in a way that was about more than the room. The staff member printed her receipt, slid it across the desk in a small folder. Zoe took it. Standard checkout, clean and simple, the hotel releasing her back into the world with professional pleasantness and no fanfare. She picked up her bag. "Oh," the staff member said. "One moment." She reached beneath the desk and produced a small envelope, cream-colored, with Ms. Callahan written on the front in handwriting that was precise and unhurried. "Ms. Arquette asked me to make sure you received this." Zoe took the envelope. She did not open it at the desk. She moved to the side, near the concierge station, out of the flow of the checkout line, and held it for a moment. Her name on the front in that handwriting. The weight of it, which was almost nothing, and also not nothing at all. She opened it. Inside was a business card. The hotel's card. Camille Arquette, General Manager, the standard information on the front. She turned it over. On the back, in the same precise handwriting, "The Cumberland is better at dusk, in case you find yourself back in Nashville." And below that, a phone number that was not the hotel's. Zoe stood at the concierge station and read it twice. Then she looked up at the lobby. The checkout rush. The rolling suitcases, the conference badges disappearing into pockets, and felt something in her chest do something she didn't have a clean word for. Not the complicated thing from yesterday morning in the breakfast room. Something cleaner than that. Something that knew its own shape. Bex appeared at her elbow, read the card over her shoulder in approximately 1 second, and said nothing, which was the most generous thing she had ever done. They walked out through the lobby doors into the Nashville morning. The valet brought their car. Zoe put her suitcase in the trunk and the card in her jacket pocket, close, where she could feel the slight weight of it against her ribs. In the car, Bex drove. Zoe held the card without taking it out again and looked at the city going past the window. The streets, the bridges, the river glimpsed between buildings, and thought about dusk and the Cumberland, and a phone number written in handwriting that was precise and unhurried, exactly like its author. The airport was 40 minutes away. She had 40 minutes to decide what kind of person she was going to be about this. She already knew. The airport was the kind of busy that makes you feel anonymous in a useful way. Zoe and Bex moved through check-in and security with the practiced efficiency of people who travel enough to have stopped finding airports interesting. And by the time they reached the gate, Zoe had done everything she was supposed to do. Boarding pass checked, bag stowed, seat confirmed, and was sitting in a plastic chair near the window with 43 minutes until boarding, and the card in her jacket pocket and her phone in her hand. She had opened a new message to the number 3 times. She had closed it 3 times. "You know what your problem is," Bex said, without looking up from whatever she was reading. "I have several. You'll need to be specific. You write better than you talk." Bex turned a page. "You've been staring at that phone for 20 minutes trying to find the perfect opening line, and there isn't one, because the perfect opening line doesn't exist. And you know this. And you're doing it anyway." Zoe looked at the phone. "I just don't want it to be wrong, bad, embarrassing." "Yes, Zoe." Bex finally looked up. She put her personal number on a hotel card and wrote you a note about the Cumberland at dusk. She has already done the hard part. You just have to show up. Zoe looked at the cursor, blinking with the patience of something that had nowhere to be. She typed, "The Cumberland at dusk. I think I can work with that." She sent it before she could close the window a 4th time. 30 seconds. Her phone buzzed. "I was hoping you'd say that." "When?" She typed, 3 weeks. I have a conference in Memphis. Nashville is 40 minutes from Memphis." The response came fast. 45, actually. I looked it up. Zoe stared at that. Past tense. Before the card. Before the checkout. Which meant at some point, in the margins of a long day, between the tablet and the staff meetings, and Mr. Hargrove and his suite, Camille had looked up the distance between Nashville and Memphis, and held on to that number, just in case. Bex read it over her shoulder, set her book down with the ceremony of someone marking an occasion. "She looked it up," she said quietly. "She looked it up. Boarding was called. Zoe stood, picked up her bag, and walked 4 steps toward the gate. Then she stopped. Bex, behind her, said nothing. She just watched. Zoe stood in the middle of gate C14 with her boarding pass in her hand and the card in her pocket, and the specific, clarifying knowledge that she had spent 3 days in a hotel being careful and strategic and managed, and that none of it had worked, and that there was a woman 40 minutes away who had looked up a distance and held onto it quietly, in case it became useful. She turned around. "Go," Beck said, already smiling. "I'll get the next flight." Zoe. Bex took her carry-on from her hand, with the calm authority of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment since a hotel lobby on Tuesday evening. "Go." Zoe typed one message on the way down the escalator. "Actually, how's today?" The Uber was already moving when the response came. "I'll be at the front desk." She walked into the Fern and Stone at 12:47 p.m. The lobby was quieter now. The conference crowd gone. The checkout rush settled. The marble floors back to their honest midday self. The smell of cedar and something faintly floral. The east-facing windows doing what they did with afternoon light. Camille was at the front desk, not reviewing anything on her tablet, not managing a situation. Just standing, with the stillness of someone who had decided to be exactly where they were and nowhere else. She looked up when the doors opened. She saw Zoe. She didn't move toward her immediately. She just looked, the way she always looked, full and unhurried and without performance. And something in her expression shifted in a way that Zoe recognized, because it was the same thing happening in her own chest. Zoe crossed the lobby. She stopped at the desk. The same marble, the same distance that had started all of this 3 days ago. "You missed your flight," Camille said. "I did. That's very inconvenient." "Extremely," Zoe agreed. A beat. The lobby held its breath. "The Cumberland is better at dusk," Camille said. "You have approximately 6 hours. What do we do with 6 hours?" Camille came around the desk, not rushing, not performing, just moving toward her with the same quality of intention she brought to everything, and stopped close enough that the space between them was a choice rather than a default. "I have some ideas," she said quietly, "if you're open to them." Zoe looked at her, really looked, the way she hadn't let herself do fully until now, and said, "I came back to a hotel I already checked out of on a Tuesday afternoon. I think open is a fair description of where I'm at." Camille smiled. The open one, unguarded, the door not just cracked but all the way. She reached out and touched Zoe's face, just briefly, her thumb at Zoe's cheek. And Zoe leaned into it without thinking, and then Camille kissed her. Softly, deliberately, the way she did everything. Without hurry, without performance. Like something she had already decided and was only now saying out loud. It lasted a moment. It was enough. It was the whole conversation they'd been having since Tuesday, finally said in the right language. When they stepped back, the lobby was exactly the same as before. The marble floors, the cedar smell, the east-facing light. Nothing had changed, and everything had. "Come on," Camille said, her hand finding Zoe's. "I know a place by the river." They walked out of the Fern and Stone together into the Nashville afternoon, and the Cumberland was still an hour from its best light, and they had exactly enough time. 3 weeks later, Zoe drove the 45 minutes from Memphis to Nashville on a Friday evening and didn't check into a hotel. She checked into Camille's apartment instead. A third-floor walk-up in East Nashville with good light and too many books, and a kitchen that smelled like coffee and something herbed and warm. Camille cooked. Zoe sat on the counter and talked too much, and got in the way, which Camille tolerated with the patience she brought to everything, and at some point, the cooking stopped being the point. They walked to the river at dusk. Camille had been right about it. The The Cumberland at that hour was a different thing entirely. The light doing something generous and unhurried across the water, the bridges casting long reflections, the city settling into itself. They stood at the railing, and Zoe thought about a rooftop and a card and a number written in precise handwriting, and the 45 minutes that had turned out to be nothing at all. "I have a question," Zoe said. "You can ask," Camille said, and the familiarity of it, their sentence, already theirs, landed somewhere warm and permanent. "When did you look it up? The distance?" Camille was quiet for a moment. The river moved below them. "Wednesday morning," she said, after the elevator. "Wednesday morning, before the rooftop, before the card, before any of it had been said out loud." Zoe looked at her. "You looked it up after 4 minutes in an elevator." "I told you," Camille said simply. "I pay attention." Zoe laughed, the full kind, the unguarded kind, and Camille watched her laugh with an expression that was unhurried and certain and completely unguarded. The dusk held. The river kept moving. Zoe reached over and took Camille's hand. Camille held on without hesitation, the way she did things when she had already decided. Then she turned and kissed her temple, slow and quiet, just because she could. And Zoe closed her eyes for a moment and let it land. The 45 minutes became a ritual. Every other Friday, Zoe's car appeared in the East Nashville parking lot at some point between 6 and 8, depending on traffic and meetings and the particular mercy of the universe on any given week. Camille learned to have something on the stove by 7 just in case, and Zoe learned that Camille's idea of a quiet evening involved exactly 1 glass of wine, 1 record on the turntable, and a book she was only pretending to read because she kept looking up. They argued about small things with the comfortable frequency of people who had stopped being careful with each other. Zoe was constitutionally incapable of leaving cabinet doors closed. Camille had opinions about the correct way to load a dishwasher that she held with quiet, immovable conviction. Zoe thought she was wrong. Camille thought Zoe was wrong. Neither of them changed. It became a joke, and then a language, and then just part of the texture of being together. Bex visited in month 2 and declared Camille terrifyingly competent and somehow also warm, which should be illegal, and told Zoe privately, over wine on the apartment's small balcony, while Camille was inside doing the dishes correctly, that she had never seen her this relaxed. Zoe said she didn't know what she was talking about. Bex looked at her for a long moment and let it go, which meant she was right, and they both knew it. In month 3, Zoe's company offered her a position that could be based anywhere with a regional hub. Nashville had a regional hub. She didn't mention it to Camille for 2 weeks, which Camille noticed because Camille noticed everything, and didn't press, which was the thing about her that Zoe had loved first and understood better now. She made room without demanding you fill it. When Zoe finally told her, they were at the river. Their spot, the railing above the Cumberland, the city settling into its evening self around them. "There's a position," Zoe said. "I could base out of Nashville." Camille looked at the water, then at her. "What do you want to do?" "I'm asking what you think." "I know," Camille said. "I'm asking what you want." Zoe looked at the river and thought about 45 minutes, and Friday evenings and cabinet doors and a turntable, and someone who looked up distances on Wednesday mornings just in case. She thought about the specific quality of being known. Really known. The inconvenient parts included, by a person who had decided you were worth the attention. "I want to stop driving 45 minutes, she said. Camille was quiet for a moment. The river moved below them, patient and unhurried, the way it always was. "That's 45 minutes you'd get back," she said. "Every week. That's a lot of time." "It is," Zoe said. "I've been thinking about what to do with it." Camille turned to look at her fully then, the whole attention, nothing held back, and said, "I have some ideas, if you're open to them." It was the same sentence from the lobby, 6 months ago, And they both knew it. And what it meant now was larger than what it had meant then, which was already considerable. Zoe moved to Nashville on a Saturday in October, which Camille spent helping her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs to an apartment 4 streets from her own, because they had agreed, with the practical wisdom of 2 people who knew themselves, that moving in together immediately was a story for later. They had time. The 45 minutes were gone. 5, which meant the time was theirs to use differently now. In longer mornings and shared grocery runs and the particular domesticity of 2 people building a life in the same city, on their own terms, at their own pace. The boxes took most of the afternoon. Camille knew where everything should go, and said nothing. Just quietly move things into better arrangements when Zoe wasn't looking, which Zoe noticed immediately, and said nothing about, which was its own form of fluency, the language of 2 people who had learned each other's edges and decided to stay anyway. By evening, the apartment was livable if not finished. They sat on the floor with Thai food containers and bad posture, and Camille's record player, which had migrated over at some point in the move without formal discussion, playing something low and unhurried in the corner. "You're going to rearrange my kitchen," Zoe said. "I'm not going to rearrange your kitchen. You're thinking about it." Camille picked up her chopsticks. "I'm thinking about a lot of things." Zoe looked at her. The specific, unhurried quality of her. The woman who had handed her a room key and a smile that wasn't professional on a Tuesday in June, and changed the whole geometry of her life without making a production of it. She leaned across the takeout containers and kissed her, slow and easy, the kind of kiss that has nowhere to be and knows it. Camille kissed her back the same way, one hand coming up to Zoe's jaw, and for a moment the record played, and the city moved outside, and none of the boxes were unpacked, and it didn't matter at all. "Hey," Zoe said when they pulled back. "Hey," Camille said. "Good call. On the card." Camille held her gaze for a moment, warm and certain, and said, "Good call." On coming back. Outside, Nashville did what it always did. Indifferent, beautiful, unhurried. And inside, on the floor of an apartment that was already becoming home, 2 women finished their dinner and stayed there long after the food was gone, talking about nothing important and everything that was. The record playing quietly in the corner until the needle reached the end of the side, and the room went still. Neither of them got up to flip it. They didn't need the music anymore.